Hey, welcome back to Fork University, where we make sense of the madness, bust a few myths, and show you how food may not be medicine, but it is important. I am your chief medical explanationist and host, Dr. Terry Simpson. Today, we're going to tackle the topic that is both timely and critical. We're going to talk about why chiropractors and other functional medicine practitioners take stool samples and recommend rather restrictive diets for autoimmune disease like Hashimoto's thyroiditis, rheumatoid arthritis, and others. Let's start with the simple truth. Autoimmune diseases are complex, chronic conditions that require careful management. Conditions like Hashimoto's thyroiditis, where the immune system attacks the thyroid gland, leading to hypothyroidism, are not easily fixed by dietary changes or gut health gimmicks. Yet there are people out there, often without a medical degree, claiming they can diagnose and treat these serious conditions by analyzing your stool or putting you on a restrictive diet. Let me be clear. These folks are quacks. Now, don't get me wrong. Diet does play a role in your health, and there's growing evidence that our gut microbiome is important to overall well-being. But when it comes to autoimmune disease, the science is far more nuanced than what these so-called experts would have you believe. Let's break it down. First, let's talk about the chiropractors and other alternative health practitioners who claim they can diagnose autoimmune diseases and their treatments by analyzing stool samples. The idea here is by looking at the bacteria in your gut, they can identify imbalances or what we call dysbiosis, which claims to be the root cause of your autoimmune disease. They will tell you by adjusting your gut bacteria, usually with expensive probiotics, supplements, and restrictive diets, you can cure or manage your disease. Here's the problem. While it's true that our gut microbiome influences many aspects of our health, the science of specific gut bacteria to autoimmune disease is in its infancy. We do not yet have a clear understanding of how to manipulate the gut microbiome and treat autoimmune diseases effectively. The studies that do exist are often preliminary, done with mice or rats, or based on small sample sizes of human beings. And to extrapolate that limited amount of data into broad claims that gut health can cure or significantly change autoimmune disease is just not only premature, it's irresponsible. I'll give you an example. A study published in Nature Reviews Immunology in 2015 highlighted the complexity of gut-immune interaction and noted that the gut microbiome likely plays a role in the development of autoimmune disease, but we are far from understanding how to target it for treatment. More recent research, such as that from the Journal of Autoimmunology in 2021, supports that view, acknowledging that while gut dysbiosis is associated with autoimmune conditions, there is no one-size-fits-all pattern, no one solution to fixing it through diets or gut probiotics. Furthermore, recent studies show that stool samples may not be helpful in determining the gut microbiome, especially in the context of determining autoimmune disease. A study by Liu et al. Found that fecal bacteria significantly different from the swab and tissue microbiota in patients with irritable bowel syndrome versus if we lavage the gut with like a colonoscopy so we can get truer to where anatomically the gut microbiome is. Let's be clear. The chiropractors will have you take a stool sample. However, the microbacteria which are in your gut that might be affecting it are going to be completely different if you go up further into the colon as if you use a colonoscopy. Leviathan et al. Demonstrated stool samples are a poor proxy for what we call the inner colonic microbiome, or the bacteria of your gut. Their study showed that those samples that were taken very carefully significantly differ from those in a stool sample. It's just not the same thing. So in summary, stool samples may not be helpful for determining gut microbiome, as if gut microbiome could actually fix autoimmune diseases. So when someone takes your stool sample and say they can cure your Hashimoto's or your lupus or your rheumatoid arthritis by tweaking your diet and selling you rather expensive stuff, they're selling you snake oil. The truth is, managing autoimmune diseases requires a multifaceted approach and typically involves medications such as synthetic thyroid hormone in the case of Hashimoto's and close monitoring by healthcare professionals. This is something that these people have no clinical idea about. They weren't trained clinically. Let's be clear, a chiropractor doesn't have the extensive clinical training that a physician does. Consider this. Your average medical student not only spends 2 years studying basic clinical medicine in a textbook, they then go on to the wards of hospitals where they see the most complex patients on the planet, treated by the most well-known physicians on the wards. Then they go out and do a 3-year internal medicine internship in some of the brightest hospitals in the nation, taught by some of the best scientists. Then they go on to do a fellowship in rheumatology. Compare that to a chiropractor who has 2 years of neck cracking. Let's move on. Let's talk about the restrictive diets that are pushed by these practitioners. You've probably heard of the Autoimmune Protocol, or the AIP Diet, which eliminates a wide range of foods from grains and legumes to nightshades, dairy, eggs, nuts, and seeds. The idea is that these foods could trigger some immune response, and by eliminating them, you can reduce inflammation and manage your autoimmune disease. Sounds promising, right? The problem is that the AIP diet is based on very, very weak science. While some people report feeling better on these diets, we have to ask why. Is it limited by their eliminating food groups, or is it simply that their disease comes and goes, relapses, returns, goes into remission, which is the nature of autoimmune disease? Let's look at a study published in Nutrients in 2017. They looked at the AIP diet in the context of inflammatory bowel disease, another autoimmune disease, and found that while some patients experienced symptomatic relief, the study was small, lacked a control group, couldn't possibly say it was the AIP diet, etc. There are other diets that are used for this. Typically what they will do is, let's eliminate dairy. I can tell you, based on what we have seen and has been told to us, that their formula comes down to this. Besides selling you the really expensive supplements, the really expensive probiotics for which there is zero, and I mean zero evidence, they will tell you to eliminate dairy, eliminate gluten, and go on one of these highly restrictive diets, like the Whole30 diet or the AIP diet. And then they'll say, look, you're cured. Let's be very clear. When you have a relapsing disease like rheumatoid arthritis, you are going to have times when it's going to relapse for unknown reasons. It's not your gut microbiome. It will just does it over time. And if you have rheumatoid arthritis, aren't getting appropriate clinical medicine, you will end up with more joint destruction and more problems. And let's put it this way. Once the chiropractors have you out of their office, they're not going to be able to follow your inflammation. They're not going to be able to follow your joint destruction. They don't care. They just want to sell you their exceedingly expensive tests, which cost up to $500 for a stool sample, and their supplements, which are like $90 a point at each. So what's the bottom line? When it comes to autoimmune diseases, beware of anyone who promises a cure or significant management from diet and supplements alone. The science simply doesn't support these claims. Instead, focus on working with a qualified healthcare provider. If you have a rheumatologic disease, see a board-certified rheumatologist. If you have a problem with your thyroid, see a board-certified endocrinologist, because these non-qualified nurses, dentists, and chiropractors who get their little functional medicine degree, which, by the way, they focus on thyroid disease, and they focus poorly on it, they simply don't lack the clinical experience, the comprehensive literature knowledge, and they end up keeping people from having support. The support you need for an exceedingly complex medical problem. All right. Managing autoimmune diseases is a marathon. It's not a sprint. It requires thoughtful, multifaceted approach, not a quick fix. Don't let those quacks steer you off courses with promises far too good to be true. I hope today's episode has shed a little light on the dangers of these so-called miracle cures with miracle diets and the quackery that sounds too good. This reminds me of one thing else. Do you remember when chiropractors used to say the cure of all their diseases is in subluxations of the spine, which they could never see, could never demonstrate, and spent years telling you to come back every week? Now they're going to the gut. They can't see it. They have sort of a sciencey test, and they are trying to convince you they alone have the answer to the root cause of disease, as opposed to all of the people who seriously study this and follow their patients intently and publish in the literature. The only root cause of disease that these functional medicine practitioners have found is your wallet. I would be careful of them. See board-certified people to make sure. Thanks for joining me on this episode of Fork You, where we try to make sense of the madness. I'm your host, Dr. Terry Simpson. This has been written and researched by me, and you can find references for this for those of you who like it on the blog associated with this, which is called yourdoctorsorders.com or forkyou.com. I want to thank the people who are distributing this, our friends at Simpler Media, the pod god, Mr. Evo Terra, and of course, I couldn't produce this without my favorite producer in the world from Producer Girl Productions. Thanks for listening. We'll see you later.